In this section we will work on the front wall, and on the any color medium weight chipboard we have some pieces for the top and the base and the sides, and then under the black chipboard for the front wall we have 2 pieces for the back and front, and then a piece for the gate. The first thing we're going to do is measure our back wall to length. So I'll start by putting in the right tower and holding that in position. I've got it snug up against my right wall over here, and I can see that it's properly aligned in the front. And then I'm just taking one of my side pieces and I'm going to hold it vertically right next and tight up against that tower. I'm holding that side wall in place, and I'm going to remove this column. And then wherever the end of that wall comes to, I'm going to make a tick mark on my base. Now I'm going to take one of my wall pieces, these have been cut in a little bit long, I'm going to hold it up in place there. I've got it tight against this left column, and then I'll just make a mark on it to match that tick mark we made on the base. And then I'll cut this to length. This is going to be my back. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll be back. And then once I've cut that to the length, I'm going to put that in place here, and we'll just try it again and make sure that it is just where we want it to be. And if everything looks good, we'll leave it in place there and just take a couple of pieces of low-tack tape and attach it to your pedestals. I also put a couple little pieces of that tape here in the front, making sure that I'm keeping this panel plumb. You can use a pattern from this tile floor that we've got installed here to help you make sure that's aligned. And if you put tape here, make sure you crease it real well, because we're going to put a 3/4 inch piece of cardstock here next to measure for our top and base. So I have a piece of white cardstock here that's about 10 inches long, and it's 3/4 of an inch wide. As long as it's at least 9 inches long, that'll be fine, but it needs to be exactly 3/4 of an inch wide. And what I want to do is just kind of have it come down into the tower area here so that that whole end is underneath. I hope you can see that I've just got this left end kind of flapping up here. It's a little bit too long. I'm holding that tower in place, and I'm going to make sure that I have my paper straight along this wall here, and just with a sharp pencil I'm going to trace the bottom of that column just like that. So I have this pencil mark here that I'm going to cut. And once I have this end cut, I'm going to flip it over and see how it fits down at this end. And these columns are coming in at the same distance, so this should be a good fit. And on mine it is. I'm checking back in that corner, and it looks good. Now if yours isn't good, you can just take your pencil and trim it and fix it until it is. And then we'll leave that piece butted up against this left end, and then put our right column back in place, and then we'll trace again. This time I'm going to make an arrow so it points to the back wall so that I know which way it goes in. It should, since this end matched, both ends match, it shouldn't be an issue, but I just like to be careful. So now I will cut this end off and just try it one more time. That looks good. So now I will use this piece as a template on one of our long strips that we have and cut off my two ends and mark that arrow. So I'll do that and then I'll be back. And now that I have this piece cut on the two ends, I'll put it in place here and check and see if I need to do any kind of fine tuning. If it hangs over a little, make sure you just come back and retrace and bring it back in a little bit so that you have a nice good fit. So now that we have our piece all cut to size and we know it's right, I'm looking to see where the edge of it comes, and on mine it's coming right to this red stripe there, but I'm just going to use a couple of post-it notes and bump them right up against the end of that chipboard so that we'll know where to place it here in a second when we do some additional sizing. So I've put those two pieces of post-it in place, and then I'm going to remove my tower, temporarily remove this piece, and then remove the blue tack tape and take off the back piece. And once I have the back wall out, I'm going to put my chipboard piece, base piece back on, lining it up with my two post-it notes, and putting it in place with some tape. I'm just reusing the tape I just had. And that will keep that gap in the back there for the back wall, but it will also allow us to see if this back wall is the same length that we need for the front wall. So I'm going to put this wall in place on the front side and then bring in my column, and then I'll kind of look and see what's going on. You have to look from above. So I looked from above, especially down in this corner here, because I have it butted up against my left corner, to see if there's any gaps going on there, and there's not. And so this piece appears to be, for me at least, a good fit for both the back and the front at this length. I also used my level to make sure I was holding it plumb when I did that. Now if yours is slightly different, just make a note of what that is, the difference is, and then when you cut, your other piece, make that adjustment. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my front piece, and then I'll be back. So I have my front piece cut as well, and I'm ready to do a dry fit of everything I've cut here. So I'm going to start by putting in my back piece, and then once I have my back piece in, I'll slide the base in. I'll bring my right tower into place, and I'm holding that there, so now my back isn't moving. I'm just going to take a couple of the side pieces and put them up on either side here, just to kind of help keep that front wall straight. It doesn't matter if the side pieces are straight. And then I'll bring the front wall in that I just cut and do one final look at that. And I'll look, down and around my corners and everything. See how everything looks. I'm seeing the bird's eye view on my camera right now, so I can see that looks pretty good. And then I can see it from the front here as well. So I know my pieces are sized correctly, and I'm ready to move on. So I've prepped my two walls with some strips of decorative paper prior to using my on the edge die that we've been using, and I used 7/8 of a strip of, this is from the 6x6 inch pad. It reads as solid. Now obviously you'll have to make a join in it, and if you're concerned about if that join will show, you could put it in the center, because we'll have a decorative element that's going to go on the front there in the center. And then on the back, and then if you're using craft chipboard, you'll want to use a 7/8 of an inch strip on the back side of this front wall part. And then on the back, I've put some, this is the same paper that I used on the front side of all the other walls, and it is going, it's a 7/8 of an inch strip here as well. And then no matter what color of chipboard you have, put a strip of 7/8 inch black on the back. And the reason I'm doing that, even with the black chipboard, is that I'm going to add paper on the back side of this, and it'll just be nicer if it has an edge up here to come against. So I'll put that on. Of course, give all of these a good burnish, and then I will cut out my two top edges using my on the edge die, lining that up as we've done on the other walls. So here are my two walls that I've now cut with my die, and in case you're wondering, this wall on that die will just fit inside of both Sizzix and Tim Holtz Vagabond machines. Hopefully it would fit in the size machine you have if it's something different. So those are the two walls, and they have their I've inked them and they're ready to go. So I'm just going to put them aside for a moment because I want to create a template to cut the gate opening. I'm going to create this template by measuring first in. I'll just draw a line that is, I'll draw a vertical line. I'm just using my craft mat here. And then to the right of that, at 2 7/8, I'm going to draw a parallel line. So these lines are 2 7/8 apart. Then I'm going to turn it this way. I'm again going to use a line on my craft mat to make my life easier, and measure up from the bottom 2 1/4. So that's 2 1/4 up from the bottom. This was 2 1/4. I'll turn it back this way, and I want to mark a center point here. And that center point is 1 7/16, because that's half of 2 7/8. Now you can see I have my compass out here. I have a good sharp pencil point on my compass, and I'm going to set it for this 1 7/16 mark. And 1 7/16 is a 1/16 inch less than 1 1/2. I'll put the compass point on that center point I just marked and draw an arc here at the top. And that's going to be our opening. So I'm going to cut carefully around this template on the line, and then I'll be back. Now I find it easier to cut this kind of a curve with my craft knife. I just go along there for a while when I can't, when my position of my arm gets a little bit wrong. I keep my point in the mat and I just curve it around a little bit more, and then carefully continue. That way I get a nice smooth cut. So now we have our template for our opening. I'm going to use the actually this piece to draw on my my walls. So I'll get the walls. So here's my front wall, And I'm going to start out by marking a center point. And so I'll just use my centering ruler here and find my center and mark a tick mark there. Now, I'm sure that's hard for you to see on this black, but there's a center mark right here. And then I'm going to take my template, and I can line up the center mark on my template with that mark that I just made. And then I want to just double check. So I'm going to measure from my sides here and check the measurement on my left and right. And once I'm sure that I have that in the correct position, I'll just use a couple little pieces of blue tack tape, and I'm just putting them center here in the straight parts. Now I'm going to use a chalk pencil to draw around my template. Just hold it down and come right up to that edge. Or you can use a pencil if you can see it. I just find this chalk pencil a lot easier to use. Make sure whatever you're using, that your mark is directly on the edge of that template. And then I can remove the template. Now the key to drawing this out and getting it correct is to leave the chalk line or a pencil line behind. And if you cut just inside that towards the middle, you will get the hole will be the same size as the hole that is on your template. If you cut on the other side, it'll be slightly bigger. It's not the end of the world, but things have been sized so that you get, we want this opening to be 2 7/8 inch wide is the bottom line. So I've got a good sharp blade in my craft knife, and I think the other thing I'll do is go ahead and measure up 2 1/4 from the bottom here. I'm just going to make a little, I'm not going to use that chalk pencil is too thick for this purpose. So I've made a couple of pencil lines right there, and that's to let me know that I can take my ruler, a straight edge, and go straight with my craft knife, lining this up to that point. And then once I hit that point, then I'll want to continue just curving it around. But that way I'll get two good straight parallel lines here at 2 7/8 apart on the front. And just to cut this curve here, make sure you have a good sharp, probably new blade in your craft knife. So I'm going to cut out of this opening, and then I'll repeat it, the same spacing, etc., for the back piece so that I have two matching openings. So I've cut my openings in both pieces, and now I'm ready to add some more decorative paper to these sides. I have the front side here. It's the side that has the red solid paper across, and I think you can see that I've prepped it with some score tape here. To go around this opening, I just put a strip of 1 1/2 inch tape in, and then use my craft knife to cut it equal or even with the side there. And then this is the paper that I've chosen for the front. So I'll remove my score tape backing and put that on and get that burnished. And now that I have that paper on, I'll go ahead and flip it to the back, and I'm going to cut it even with the opening here, just by running my craft knife right along that opening. Now on the back wall, this is the side that's facing towards the front, and we're leaving that alone. I'm going to flip it to the back. This is the side where I put a piece of a 7/8 inch black cardstock along the top. And I'm again going to use this same paper on the inside, but I'm treating it a little differently. And that is that on the back side of the paper, I've run a strip of 1.5 inch score tape. And then here on the sides, I just used my craft mat and brought some score tape up to the 2-inch mark, kind of just to get these bottoms, because when this piece comes in, that will take care of the top with this band, and then we'll have this tape at the bottom. So I'll go ahead and put this piece of paper on. No cutting though, don't cut yet. So here I'm looking at it from the side with the black cardstock and the paper attached. Now I'll flip it over. And I think you can see the sheen there. There's the 1.5 inch tape at the top. And what I want to do is fill in, or actually put 2 strips of 1/2 inch tape in to meet up with that 1.5 inch tape. I'm just putting it right on the edge of that chipboard and cutting it off. And I'll repeat that on the other side. And now what I want to do is cut out the paper, but I'm going to leave 1/2 inch of it behind. And these 1/2 inch strips can kind of give you a guideline for down here at the bottom. I'm just cutting right on the outside of them. And then I'm just using that as a guideline. Now this is sticky because there's no backing on it. And coming up and making a curve that's about 1/2 inch away from that outline, so that I'm left with something like this. And then just so this stickiness won't get in my way as I'm working, I'm going to take my little strip of the backing paper here, and I'm just going to cut around. This is my template from making the openings. So I'm just cutting a piece of it that I can take and stick in that opening. And now we won't have any stickiness while we're working on the next step. So now we're ready to start working on the wall structure, making it 3D. I'm going to start out by, this is the back piece, the inside of it. I'm going to turn it on its side here and line up one edge with my craft mat, or a line on my craft mat. And then I'm going to make a pencil line at 3 13/16. That's a 1/16 more than 3/4. And I'm going to make that straight across here. Now the next thing we need to do is make 2 base pieces. We know we have this piece that we sized and cut, and this is our top piece. What we need to do is use this as a template to make the pieces for the base. So I'm going to start out by just taking this piece that we cut to begin with and tracing the ends on my other piece, and then cutting those ends with a sharp craft knife. So once I've cut my 2 ends on the second piece, so you can see I've put my arrow on here, I can put my top piece to the side for now. And then this piece, first I'll start out with this edge over here and line up the corner of the chipboard with the corner of that wall, and then I can make a tick mark where the end of this wall is at the opening here, and I'm going to put left right away there, and then I'll move over to the other side and make another tick mark, and I'll write right on that side, and then I'll cut these pieces straight across to get my two base pieces. Once I have those pieces cut, I'll just double check their length by putting them up underneath my wall here, and they both look good, so we're got all of our pieces that we need. So I'll put those aside for now because we want to install some ledger strips first. Now we're ready to add some ledger strips, and I'm going to start with pieces that are 2 3/4 inches long. I've got 2 of those, and they're going to go up here at the top. And I'm just going to turn this around so I can see to work on it. And when we're going to put them up against the line we drew here, and when they go in, they need to be at least 1/4 inch back from the edge, and they shouldn't touch the curve of this arch. So at least 1/4 inch from the edge, and not touching that curve of the arch, and this size should work for the dimensions that we've been working with. So I'll put one on the other side as well. So I have these 2 installed at the top, and now I'm going to put 2 on the outside edges. These I've cut 3 3/8, 3 3/8. And when I put these down, I'm going to take my ruler and hold the 1/4 inch line up against the edge so that these stay back and 1/4 inch from the edge. And then you want them to stay up about 1/16 inch or so from the bottom here. So my ruler's at 1/4 inch, and I'm just putting that strip in, and then I'll do that as well on this side. Now I have these 2 installed on the sides, and I'm ready to put 2 going this direction here in the center. Now when we put these on, we want to use one of our scraps so that we hold it back 1/16 inch from this edge. Now it'll go up here into this area, and that's fine. You just want to hold it back about 1/8 inch from the bottom edge. So I'll get those 2 pieces installed. And now we just need to fill in with a couple ledger strips on the bottom, and I'm just going to measure to see what size. It's about 1 5/8 in between there, so I'm going to cut these 2 to 1.5 inches each, and then when I put them in, I'll hold them back 1/16 inch, or the width of the chipboard, from the bottom. So I'll get those 2 installed. Now we're ready to start building the structure. I started by running a bead of glue along this bottom edge, and now I'll take the left piece that we cut and then get that installed. It should be flush with the bottom, and the ends should meet up in the opening and also at this far end over here. So I have the 2 base pieces installed, and now I'm going to put 2 outside pieces on, and they will come right up and butt against that bottom edge and come all the way up here they should meet to the line here at the top, and they should be inside of the little curves that we have. So now I have the 2 side pieces installed. I'm going to turn it this way, and we're going to have to trim these last ones a little bit, and they fit in here right along the edge of the opening, but they'll have to fit underneath this ledger strip. It doesn't matter where, just cut them a little bit short, because the only part that matters is this straight part down here. So I'm just holding this up here, and I'm marking it just somewhere below that top ledger strip, and then I'll just on that end I can just use my scissors to cut off, because it's just not critical that it's straight. So I put my glue on. We should have a nice square corner down here at the bottom, and this side should be flush with the opening while it is square down here, and then it just kind of comes up into that curved area. And I'll do the same thing with this other side, trim it off to length, and then get it installed directly on the edge of the opening. Before we put the front side on, I want to add a couple of ledger strips to that as well, just to have a little extra support there when it goes on. So I'm going to turn this piece over and line it up on my craft mat, and again make that line at 3 13/16, a 1/16 more than 3/4. And then I've cut a couple of ledger strips here that are 2.5 inches long. Hold them back about 1/2 inch from the end and line them up on that line we just drew. And I'll repeat that on the other side. And now to join the front and the back, I've run a bead of glue along all of our side pieces here. And then I'll just take the front and put it down and make sure that these inside edges are aligned, the bottoms are aligned, and our corners should be good as well. So I'll get that done and then allow that to dry. And now that the wall unit has set up, we can put in our top piece. I've covered mine here with the same paper that I used on the top of the other walls, and I have the directions so that it's facing front. I used my arrow to make sure I have my piece oriented. And then here on the inside, I've added glue on the tops of the ledger strips, but I've also continued that line of glue across the opening there. Hopefully you can see that on both sides. And now I can just drop this piece in and make sure the ends are aligned.